The Elements of Friendship, Book 1, Harmony, by Armus Fegeland. Chapter 9, Beyond the Sea. Fading in and out of consciousness, a stitch in her chest, Twilight only had a vague idea of where she was. The full moon glowed in the western corner of the sky, indicating they were megagrosses of miles away from the Crystal Mountains, from Nightmare Moon, from the Shadow Bolts. Weary moans and the sound of hooves shuffling through sand reached her ears. After what seemed an eternity, Twilight felt strength returning to her hooves as she rolled over to her side, a feat made more difficult by the imbalanced weight in her saddlebags. Twilight paused. The book, Studies of Ponyville Culture, was theirs. But priorities. She stood up, facing her companions. Dare she even call them her friends? They were battered and bruised, shaken and rattled with their manes tousled. Piggy Pie, surprisingly, seemed the least affected, but that may have only been because her mane and tail were perpetually fizzy. She was rolling about in the sand with a look of pure bliss, though. By contrast, Rarity looked utterly woebegone, not just in how unkempt her mane looked after 3 weeks of constant travel and a high-speed pursuit for the Shadow Bolts, but her body language as well. She looked as though her cat Opal had died right in front of her. The other three, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy, each looked wilder than they had in Ponyville, with ragged manes and overgrown fetlocks. On the Pegasi, it was clear that their wings needed printing work. "Every pony okay?" Twilight asked hoarsely. "Looks like it," Applejack replied, with a glance around the band. "Okay! I look positively bedraggled!" Verity groaned. "I don't believe I have ever looked quite so unkempt in all my life! The alabaster unicorn started upon noticing the dark, withering glare that Rainbow Dash was giving her. "I'm quite sure that the unkempt look will be fashionable sometime soon. I just wish I'd had the swing saddle if I'd known we were coming to someplace sandy." "Twilight," Fluttershy began timidly, "if you don't mind my asking, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Fluttershy," Twilight said smilingly. "You should never have to ask me if you can ask a question." "Oh, okay. I'm sorry." "Jeez, Fluttershy!" interjected Rainbow Dash. "You don't have to apologize over everything you say to any pony." "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize about apologizing either." "I'm sorry." Rainbow Dash groaned in frustration. "We're having this fight again? This is like the second time we've had this fight in a week! We've known each other all our lives. We're closer than we ever been, and we're still... Ugh." The silent Pegasus let out a growling sigh. "Oh, were we arguing?" Fluttershy responded. "I'm sorry." "So, what was your question, Fluttershy?" Twilight asked loudly, bringing the yellow Pegasus' attention back from the brass Rainbow Dash, who gaped at the yellow Pegasus with a look of mild irritation. "Oh, Twilight, what makes you think to bring us all here?" Twilight looked around the beach. In the distance to the south, she could make out the lights of a distant seaside village. To the north was a derelict lighthouse, visible against the lights of the night sky. She knew exactly where this was. "I guess I was thinking of someplace safe and remote. Nightmare Moon has to know that we've come from Ponyville, so she's going to crack down on them terribly." "Then why don't we go back to Ponyville?" Rainbow Dash snapped. "We should stick with them and be protecting them!" "I don't see it that way, Rainbow." Rainbow Dash blinked at the Polemo. "You can't be serious, AJ. You're all about families sticking together. You think of Ponyville like a big second family." "That I do. And I don't deny the family should stick together," Applejack said levelly, sitting in the sand and drawing circles with a hoof. "But Twilight's family to me. She's facing a whole world's worth of trouble right now. Troubles that affect every pony everywhere. I can't just let her go through it alone." "Applejack," Twilight gasped. "And besides, I can trust Big Mac to keep our family safe. I hope you do the same, Rainbow." Rainbow Dash pointed a hoof at Applejack and opened her mouth to react. But after several seconds of silence, she lowered her hoof and sighed. "I still feel like a pile of horse apples for not being there." "Well, we have a job to do taking down Nightmare Moon, Rainbow Dash," Rarity cut in.
Queen Celestia has left this task to us, and we'll have to bear our burdens.
She shuddered as she pawed at her mane gingerly.
Ugh, I carry on.
Spike placed a claw gently on Rarity's other foreleg. Smiling at her, she smiled back. All was silent for a few moments, save the sounds of cresting waves, and Piggy's humming as he continued rolling back and forth.
Continuing on from where I left off, Twilight said, I knew that it wasn't safe to go back to Ponyville. I knew that we had to go and trust them to handle troubles that came to them.
She looked out at the lighthouse to the north.
Queen Celestia brought me here 5 years ago, when I heard that she was meeting with mermaid dignitaries from Equestria. I've never met one before then, and I admit that I was obsessed with their culture back then. Did you know that mermaids are ovoviparous?
What about the evils?
Pinkie Pie asked, rolling onto her belly.
Ovoviparous,
Twilight explained, a slight testing aid to her voice.
That means a creature carries eggs to term inside their body. Oviparous creatures, like birds, griffins, and dragons, lay their eggs externally and wait for them to hatch. Viviparous creatures, like us, ponies, don't lay eggs. But even among oviparous creatures, mermaids are unique.
How's that, Sir Cabe? Applejack asked, ignoring Rainbow Dash's groan of boredom. Twilight's eyes lit up, and an eager smile came across her face, the likes of which none of them had ever seen. The lavender unicorn had always been so serious about so much that seeing her smile was very peculiar indeed.
It's mermaid stallions who give birth to the babies.
But not so peculiar as what she had to share with them.
What?
Rainbow Dash blinked.
It's true!
Twilight continued gleefully.
The mer stallion carries the tadpole to term and gives birth when the eggs hatch.
Then why are the guy mermaids called mare stallions? Rainbow Dash asked immediately. I mean, the mer fillies don't sound like they do a whole lot with the kids.
Because females lay eggs,
Twilight explained, trying to keep up her patience.
And the mer stallion isn't the one who lays the eggs.
Let's call him Mr. Mom.
Pinkie piped up, talking to her host. Twilight smiled nervously.
Sure, let's go with that.
I still think it's weird, Rainbow Dash murmured to Twilight.
Duly noted. On a more pressing matter,
Verity cut in.
Twilight, darling, do you have the book?
The book?
Yes, I have it,
Twilight said, opening up her right saddlebag with her Dwemer shimmer and levitating the wood-bound book out of it. The carven title, Studies on Ponyville Culture, stood out amongst the starlight. Applejack smiled. We've got it! Twilight beamed at the farmer earth pony.
Now we just need to decipher the message, and we'll be one step closer.
Perhaps we should take the book a little further away from the shore?
Fluttershy added softly.
I mean, if it's okay with you.
No, of course it's all right,
Twilight said, trotting off with the book in her Dwemer shimmer. Spike close behind. Slowly, one after the other, the 5 other mares stood and followed after her, settling down upon their saddlebags at a promising spot. Twilight propped the book up against a rock and rested down on her cannons and forearms. Her alicorn glowed pink, and the cipher left by Queen Celestia in the Royal Canterlot Archives floated out of her saddlebag. Settling the cipher next to the book, Twilight's Dwemer shimmer glowed around the book itself, turning page after page. Upon reaching chapter 25, Twilight beamed, and matched the page numbers on the cipher perfectly.
It could take a while to figure this out, girls, Twilight said lightly, as he levitated a quill and inkwell from her saddlebag. You should take a rest while I decrypt this. When I've finished, I'll raise the sun over the horizon for a few moments, as I promised to Ponyville.
Rainbow Dash looked ready to protest, but a raised hoof by Applejack silenced her potential objection. Pinkie scooped up Spike and popped him onto her back as she hopped out on the back toward the ocean. Don't Rattler think it's warm enough to warrant a dip in the ocean, Applejack observed. It has to be below freezing by this point.
I would agree, Verity added. I care enough for frolicking about in the brine, but in this eternal night, I care even less so.
But why is the ocean all watery if it's below freezing? Rainbow Dash asked. Shouldn't it be, well, freezing? Because the ponies got salt land. It's why ponies don't drink directly from the ocean. You'd be losing water faster than y'all take in. You ever wonder why the Apple family lays down salt on our roads whenever y'all Pegasi schedule snowfall? Because you're a bunch of spoiled sports who don't want to have snowball fights? Applejack glowered at the sighing Pegasus, who waved her forehost defensively. It's just a soak, applesauce! Cool down! Applejack snorted through her nostrils, before resting back on her haunches and offering a thin smile. You know, the apples use salt to help chill the ice water to keep our cider cool. Rainbow Dash began to snicker, and Applejack narrowed her eyes at this. What's so funny? You said butt! Rainbow Dash chuckled highly. Rarity lightly drew a forehoof across the Rainbow Pegasus's neck. Rainbow Dash stopped laughing immediately, nursing her cheek as though it were cut. Hey! What did you do that for?
As a fellow businessman, I will stand by Applejack in her defense of business terminology,
Rarity said with a dignified air, her hose clicking together and muzzle held high.
Appreciated, Rare.
Pray don't mention it.
I won't,
Applejack said, before turning her back to face Rainbow.
Just so you know, Rainbow, a butt's about 10 dozen gallons. Try drinking all that cider at cider season and prove that you're worth your salt lick.
The bantering continued on for some time between the two, leaving the other four to find some other means which kill time.
Let's play volleyball!
Pinky squealed, with a fluttering jump in the air.
With what? Spike asked. We don't have a ball!
Oh,
Pinky said, sighing sadly as she sunk to the ground miserably, turning a faint shade of purple. Spike blinked. Were ponies really as boneless as Pinkie Pie when they got this sad? She looked like a pale purple pancake with sad blue eyes.
maybe we could collect seashells?
Fireside suggested. Pinkie literally reinflated, complete with a balloon swelling sound, and returned to her normal bright pink hue and bright pink joy.
Oh, can we play volleyball with the seashells? We can play seashells. Fluttershy, please, 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 please.
She was actually groveling at Fluttershy's hoofs. The yellow Pegasus backed up sharply, alarmed by Pinkie's rapid changes in behaviors.
Yes.
Pinkie put a hoof into the air victoriously.
Woohoo!
You can play seashells all you please, Pinkie Pie dear, Verity said, leading Spike down to beat.
But Spike and I are due a little alone time.
Spike half turned back to Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy, and held up a curled-up claw with his thumb pointing to the sky. To the best of their knowledge, this was some sort of dragon-colored gesture meaning, Score! Searching for the seashells with Rarity proved to be surprisingly entertaining to Spike. When Rarity had taken him along to kill time in this way, he thought the only thing to look forward to was spending more time with his beloved Rarity. But, in its own way, it turned out to be quite fun. There were so many kinds of seashells that Spike and Rarity found. Clamshells, snail shells, constants of all sorts. Hey! Rarity! Spike held up a clamshell, with a white squishy something inside of it. This one's still got something living in it! Rarity resisted the urge to smack the shell out of Spike's claws, as the only clamshells she would like to see should have pearls in them. But for Spike, she swallowed her revulsion and smiled.
Well found, Spike. I dare say that a clam may produce a pearl for you.
Spike gently placed the clam back on the beach, facing Rarity with his best romantic look he could muster, which he held for several seconds. Rarity gave him an expectant look, and his presentation of suaveness evaporated as he scratched his chin. Darn, really should have come up with a good line about pearls. Rarity sharply gasped, pointing out to the spray.
Oh! Spike, look!
He saw it too. A multicolored, similarly glimmer from under the tide, just a few paces out from the edge of the water. I'll go get it! Spike cried out, charging into the water. Suddenly, Applejack's voice echoed in Rarity's head. We apples use salt to help chill the ice water.
Spike, wait!
Rarity implored, a hoof raised in alarm.
The water is...
But Spike was already wading through the water, toward the rainbow something in the surf. He seemed completely unperturbed by what must have been freezing water as he reached down and picked up the object of Rarity's former attention. Returning to her side in less than half a minute, he looked slightly confused. Right along face, Rarity! Rarity blinked.
You just walked through that ocean water like it wasn't, well, freezing.
Spike looked back to the ocean. Well, I was going to show you that my scales can hold back a lot of heat and cold, but it's not that bad, actually. It's actually pretty warm.
Once more, Verity found herself blinking at Spike. Really?
Really? You should try it out.
I'm sorry, Spike, but I dare not. My maid will dry out for sure.
Oh, come on. Just your hose at least.
Rarity hesitated. Well, I suppose a little couldn't hurt. I mean, I've also read that seawater is utterly rejuvenating in small exposures. But wait, Spike! What about that thing in the water?
Spike looked down at the thing in his claws and gaped. It was a conch made out of some pearlescent rainbow material that almost seemed to glow. The gleam showed in Spike's eyes, and his natural draconic urge to start a horde began to claw at the back of his brain.
That's my gift to you, Spike, for saving my life in the Crystal Mountains.
But when Spike looked up at Rarity, awed by the beauty of her gift to him, the beast shriveled in its corner back at his mind, cowed by the strange warm feeling that filled Spike like the sun's light. Thank you, Rarity.
Think nothing of it, Spike. Just my little gift to my favorite little dragon.
She nuzzled him with her fin as he finished her sweetly spoken statement. Spike blushed. Ah, shucks. The sky brightened to a deep purple blue, a bright red aurora hovering over the eastern horizon. Spike and Rarity shared a quick look before a blaze of bright yellow orange broke across the beach and ocean, and a blast of warmth struck them. They instinctively took in deep breaths as the sun shone upon them. It was the first sunlight either had seen within a month. The loss of something so simple and so beautiful dawned upon them, and the urge to fight the nightmare was bolstered. Then it sank back below the horizon, the night returning but not the cold, and Spike and Rarity both took off for their point of unwinking. Their seashell collecting venture had taken them surprisingly little distance from the place where Twilight had settled down to decrypt the bookwork cipher. On the way, they regrouped with Pinky and Fluttershy, who were both clutching seashells in their mouths, and with Applejack and Rainbow Dash, both of whom were looking smugly triumphant. Rainbow Dash more smugly than triumphantly. Twilight's expression was neutral as he placed her ink and quill and studied some Ponyville culture in one of her saddlebags.
So, does every pony want the good news first, or bad news first?
The 6 others conferred quickly and silently among each other, and figured that the bad news should come first. Twilight nodded slowly, blinking.
I figured as much, but the good news and bad news are so closely tied that I might as well just go through them in the most logical way.
She took a deep breath before continuing.
The good news is I decrypted the Queen's bookworm cipher. The bad news is...
Twilight raised her voice slightly, as Rainbow Dash started to chuckle at the word bookworm.
The bad news is... Well, the bad news is what the decryption is.
On the slip of parchment on which Queen Celestia had written her cipher levitated a twilight storm and shimmer, showing her 6 companions what the cipher had decrypted.
I, Queen Celestia, have hidden the secret to the 6th element within the royal bloodline of Ponyville. Go to the capital, Niose Napoe, and present the cipher to Queen Malakika. She will trust you.
But... Rainbow Dash was the first to pipe up. Isn't Zebraland basically across the ocean from us?
I'm afraid so, Rainbow Dash,
Twilight replied,
and that puts us in a bad position. We can't bank on Nightmare Moon leaving the transperic zeppelins and cruisers alone. The illusion magic I've copied off Trixie can't do us any good anymore, because the Shadow Bolts have seen through it.
Applejack nodded darkly, and y'all could bet to file some sort of report about it to nasty old Noon Crater. Twilight bowed her head at Applejack's statement. So, why can't we just wink across the ocean? Rainbow Dash blurted out. I mean, you just winked us like a gigagross miles across the planet, so getting us to Ponyville should be easy.
It's not that easy, Rainbow Dash,
Twilight snapped.
No pony can wink to a location they've never physically been to before.
And since I've never been to Niose Nanuape before, never mind Ponyville in general. The discussion of Ponyville petered out after that, and Rainbow Dash floated down on the sand, kicking in frustration. "That's a bunch of pony feathers!" she shouted. "This can't be how it ends! We didn't come all this way, fighting all sorts of hypnotized royal guards, to rushing all the way across the White Plains, dealing with weird magic that Celestia locked away under a mountain, just to be a dead end at the edge of some stupid ocean!" Rainbow Dash took one deep, haggard breath after another, her serious eyes darting around to each of her compatriots. Twilight Sparkle had a look of mixed anger and sadness on her face, one cloven forehoof rubbing the other foreleg. Applejack looked rather pensive, running a hoof around the spot where her Stetson usually rested. Rarity was staring down at her hooves. Fluttershy traced out circles absent-mindedly in the sand. Pinkie Pie's mind had become long and lanky, her ears flat against her skull, as she drew a smiley face in the sand, with a weak smile on her face. Spike clutched a forearm, looking nervously morose as the rainbow conch rested at his feet. Twilight sighed. "Well, girls, guess we'll have to go undercover, work out some secret identities, smuggle ourselves out across the Pasturic Ocean. Spike, you'll have to—" "Spike, where did you find that?" Spike looked down at the rainbow conch at his feet, before picking it up and presenting it. "It's a real pretty shell that Rarity gave me. Isn't she just—" "That's the price of conch!" Twilight gasped, eyes wide with mirth. To Twilight's immense disappointment, no pony else seemed to know what she was talking about. The rest of the band gave her looks of complete bafflement. "The what now?" Applejack gasped. Twilight let out a slow breath. "The prism conch is only a priceless artifact linking the Equestrians and Aquestrians together. It's been thought to have been lost a dozen gross years." "Lost?" Rarity asked. "And found!" Pinkie added gleefully. "Yes, lost," Twilight continued. "For a gross century after Nightmare Moon's banishment, Equestria was in chaos. Apparently, there were large cults devoted to the former Queen of the Night, who were trying to overthrow Queen Celestia. Few of them went quietly. One that was based around here, near the seaside village of Pegasus." "Pegasus!" Rainbow Dash interrupted excitedly. "They named a village after the Pegasus race?" Twilight gritted her teeth. "If you ever read On the Origin of Ponies by Charles Darwin, you know that the Pegasi got their name from the village of Pegasus itself. Dozens of gross years ago, before Equestria, before the era of discord, before the queens, even before the 3 pony tribes, there were just the earth ponies and unicorns. Pegasus was an earth pony village, where Pegasus ponies would wear their wings and feathers as seagulls. It was supposed to represent the freedom they felt by the sea. Then, a Gorgon slunk out of its cave and petrified every pony in town, mare, stallion, and foal." Fluttershy whimpered. "I don't like this story." "I love this story!" Pinkie squealed. "Ponies always tell the funniest stories." Heads turned toward the pink earth pony at that statement. "Pinkie!" Rainbow Dash cocked an eyebrow at the pink pony. "If you're not a pony, then what are you?" Pinkie just giggled, greeting at Rainbow Dash with a smile that may have been a little too wide and showed more teeth than should have any business in a pony's mouth. "Silly Dashy! I'm Pinkie Pie." You know, I think that's probably the best answer we're ever going to get for this little mare. She's a Pinkie Pie. No more, no less. Just like there are Tiggers, there's a Pinkie Pie. Celestia bless her. "Putting Pinkie Pie's ambiguous equanimity for a moment," Twilight interjected with a raised voice, "unicorn scholars arrived, subdued the Gorgon, and unpetrified the affected ponies. But when they were first petrified, the Gorgon's magic stare had even petrified the wings and feathers they wore. And when they were unpetrified—" "They had wings and feathers themselves?" Spike asked. "That's right, Spike, they did!" Twilight answered brightly, before continuing in a more somber tone. "Along with the hollow avian bones that allowed for unaided flight. That's why Pegasi bones break easier than Earth ponies or unicorns.
So, what does this history lesson have to do with this doohickey? Applejack asked, pointing at the prism conch.
Twilight smacked her forehead lightly. Trots in the mouth. Sorry, girls. Anyway, about 24 years after Nightmare Moon was apparently banished, an anti-Queen Celestia cult calling themselves the Eclipse Gorgons rose up. Eclipse? Verity asked. Pardon my interruption, darling, but what is an eclipse? I don't know, Twilight replied with a shrug. But apparently, the Eclipse Gorgons meant to violently invade the Saddle Valley and overthrow Queen Celestia. From what I could tell, based off of my readings on mermaids in Equestria, the present conch was kept in a museum up at New Pegasus, but the Eclipse Gorgons stole it. Their last stand was about a furlong up the beach, where that lighthouse is now. The Wonderbolts tried to negotiate. Yes, Rainbow Dash, the Wonderbolts. Now don't interrupt me. Twilight added loudly, as he noticed Rainbow Dash perking up at the W word. Anyway, the Wonderbolts tried to negotiate, but the Eclipse Gorgons wouldn't compromise and attacked. Their hosts forced into action. The Wonderbolts completely dismantled the Eclipse Gorgons. But one of the pro-Nightmare Moon Pegasi must have had the conch and been flying over the ocean when he or she was... Well, the present conch was lost. But now we have it!
So, what's so big about this stupid prism conch? Rainbow Dash cut in obnoxiously. Rainbow! Applejack barked. Stop interrupting Twilight when she's about to explain something! She gave her lavender friend a look. You were about to explain, right?
Twilight snorted out of her nostrils. As a matter of fact, I was, Applejack. She paused, took in several deep breaths to calm her nerves after all the interruptions, trying to think about all the good things that would come about when, or if, she turned her parents back from their vegetative states. She continued, the present conch, when blown into, will magically light a beacon down in the equestrian capital of Lyonese, letting the mermaids know that Ponykind is their ally. So, if we were to blow it now? Fluttershy asked. Twilight beamed. Then the mermaids would know that the present conch was found, and they'll come up to investigate.
But how do we know they didn't take down that beacon?
Rainbow Dash asked, and for once, Twilight found an astute observation. Equestria and Equestria's search for the present conch, lost at sea, lasted for decades, before it was assumed that it was carried off by the ocean current to some uncharted part of the south, where the dragons lived. It was widely accepted that it would never be found, that it was now buried at the bottom of some ice dragon's hoard. And now here it was. One half of the link between land ponies and sea ponies. They could blow on the conch, but would their message be received? Twilight smirked, Alicorn glowing pink. Only one way to find out! The present conch floated out of Spike's claws, a pink glimmer shimmer shining around it. Twilight brought the narrow end to her lips, trying not to swallow any seawater. Breathing in deep through her nose, she blew. A deep, bellowing noise, not unlike a trumpet, but even less and even refined, boomed out from the conch, reverberating in 7 skulls and echoing across the ocean. It lingered in the air, in their ears for at least half a minute, before they felt they could hear clearly again. Well, Rainbow Dash scratched at an ear with a hind hoof. That was definitely a thing. So, how long do we wait? Verity asked. I'm not sure, replied Twilight, returning the prism conch to Spike's claws. Lyonese is a half miles out there, but they're at the bottom of the ocean. The mermaids aren't going to get here in 10 seconds, even at their top swimming speed. Also, like Rainbow Dash pointed out, there's no guarantee that the Equestrians have even kept that beacon up. We might be sending a signal that will never be received.
So, what's the plan, Lear girl?
Asked Applejack. Twilight paused at that statement by her Earth Pony friend. Well, I do suppose I'm the leader. I've been the one who's made so many decisions for our band, for better or for worse. Crescent Rose's face flashed in her mind, and her heart ached.
Mine too.
Inhaling deeply through her nostrils, Twilight spoke. We wait. For a day. There should be plenty of time for some pony from Equestria to get the signal and swim out here. Every pony okay with that? She looked pointedly at Rainbow Dash. Applejack looked at Rarity, who looked back at Applejack, Fluttershy, and Pinkie with locked eyes. Then Applejack switched to meet Pinkie Pie's eyes, and Fluttershy locked eyes with Rainbow Dash. Twilight met Rarity's eyes. One after another, each mare made eye contact with each of the other 5 mares in the party, and Spike as well. I'll wait with you, Sugar Cube, Applejack replied.
I'll stay with you, if that's okay with you,
breathed Fluttershy.
I can't wait to throw a bait and see Pony Pie,
Pinkie Pie squealed.
I would be a terrible pony to leave you now,
Rarity said with a dignified tone. Spike clutched his claws together, and eyes sparkled at her generosity. Rainbow Dash sighed. It wouldn't be awesome with me to gallop up on you like this, so I'm with you all the way, T.S. She smirked a fangy smirk. Besides, it's fun getting your goat. Twilight's ears drooped. Why am I not surprised? It's always the most serious ponies who are the funniest to see squirm. Rainbow Dash snorted in amusement at the sour look on the lavender unicorn's face. Pinkie popped up between Twilight's forelegs, her forehooves clamping on either side of Twilight's mouth, and making Twilight make kissy faces.
Ah, come on, Twilight. Don't be looking so dour. Being happy and laughing gives you power.
Scratching up her muzzle, trying not to laugh at how her face must have looked, Twilight puffed her cheeks out. Almost every pony in her band started to snicker. Rarity brought a hoof up to cover her nuzzle, and Spike actually started to smother his own mouth to hold back his chuckles. Seeing Spike's expression, Twilight could not hold it in anymore. She laughed, and the dam broke on every pony else's restraint. And soon, the whole group of 7 was laughing on the sand, and they laughed for a good long while. Applejack wiped away a tear. Goodness gravy. I think we all needed a good laugh right about now. We all will, Twilight said with a faint choke. If it turns out the mermares didn't receive the conscious call. Spike looked down at the conch in his claws, contemplating taking a blow at it himself. Screwing up his face, he puckered up his lips. A deep lowing, somewhere between a cow's moo and an earthquake, boomed down from the ocean. The waves went still as ice, pale light stirring beneath the surface. Spike fumbled, almost dropping the conch. That wasn't me! We know that, Spike, Rainbow Dash said bluntly.
Could it be the mermares?
Fluttershy wondered aloud. I don't know, Twilight replied. We're so far out, and they might not have even received the... A beam of light shot up into the sky, shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow. A faint choral humming emanated from down in the ocean, drawing the 7 of them in. The message, Twilight finished weakly. Off in the distance, she could make out the shape of something equine poking out of the water. It turned to face them, and when it spotted, it dove back down beneath, leaving no ripples. The band caught sight of a pair of flippers in place of hind legs and a long, tapering tail. I think we've made contact, Twilight, Applejack replied shakily.
Oh, I'm just so excited. I'm speechless,
Rarity cried.
Meeting our own nautical cousins, living at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Can you just imagine what their saddles must be made of? Do you think they use seashells? Oh, they simply must bind them with seaweed.
I thought you were speechless, grumbled Rainbow Dash, as Rarity continued on.
I wonder what happens to balloons underwater.
Pinkie Pie mused in rare pensiveness. Regardless, the 6 mares and 1 drake kept their eyes fixed on the edge of the shoreline, waiting for some sort of sign. With nary a ripple, a half-dozen shapes emerged from the deep. They were definitely pony-shaped, at least from the midsection forward. There were differences, though, in what was incline. Narrower muzzles was tapered to a rounded tip. Flats of skin along either side of the neck that were clearly gills. Clear fins on the back of their fetlocks. From the barrel back, though, was where the most pronounced differences were found. Where the hind legs would be were a pair of long flippers, and a tail as wide as the torso stretched out and tapered to a point. They did have cutie marks, like their Turanian cousins. 2 of the band, for even mermares used that term for a group, had wide translucent fins emerging from their backs, and another 2 had rows of spines leading from the backs of their skulls which terminated in very long, spiraling bone-white alicorns out of the middle of their foreheads. All 6 wore a clamshell on her or his back. The mermares had arrived. I'm going to just say, guys, if you want to start singing the Sea Pony song in your head at this very moment, I will not hold it against you. I'm perfectly A-okay. I'm Twilight Sparkle, she said with a high voice, nervously approaching and giving a bow to the orange Stallion at the front. I'm the apprentice of Queen Celestia, and I call upon you bearing urgent news.
I am Wavebreaker,
he replied in a screechy voice that made many land ponies' ears recede.
And the king already knows of what has unfolded, Twilight Sparkle. Our emissaries have reported on Nightmare Moon's return, and the beacon was immediately reoccupied. King Leo requests an immediate audience with you and your friends, pupil of Queen Celestia,
added the Finn mare, sea green. Her voice, too, was high and screeching.
An audience?
Rainbow Dash echoed. But we can't go underwater! We drown!
Patience, Rainbow One,
the Finn mermare replied, before facing the horned Stallion.
Angler, if you please.
Angler, the pearly white Stallion, nodded, his horn glowing the same deep blue as his eyes. The sea cell upon his back opened up, a good 7 leaves floating out in a deep blue simmer. Ah, don't like kelp, Applejack muttered ruefully. I don't even like seaweed.
The leaves of the Cyromelon plant,
explained the horned mermare,
cause land ponies who eat them to temporarily exhibit the aquatic traits of those who live in Equestria. How long is temporary?
Fluttershy asked. Wavebreaker rounded on her as he withdrew sharply.
Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked.
Wavebreaker offered a friendly smile, revealing a mouth of fangs. Fluttershy whimpered. You'll have to excuse Fluttershy, Twilight interjected. She's scared of strangers.
I'm terribly sorry to have frightened you,
said Wavebreaker gently, offering a finny hoof to Fluttershy. She took it hesitantly, offering a worried smile.
As you have asked, the Cyromelon's leaf effects varied from land pony to land pony. This batch, however, shall last each of you a week, just enough time to cross the King's Ocean.
Call me a landlubber, but I'd rather keep my hooves on solid ground, Applejack growled.
Pardon my bluntness, but your options are dreadfully limited,
said the Finn mermare.
Landlubber, Piggy giggled. She called you a landlubber, for real. Oh, these leaves will be enough for you 6 mares, and your son,
Wavebreaker said to Twilight, looking about.
Where is the little small fry?
Spike raised a claw nervously. It's me, Mr. Wavebreaker. Wavebreaker looked down on Spike, double-taking. His frilled ears flattened.
I am sorry, Miss Twilight, but our Cyromelon leaves are disagreeable with Dragon's digestive system.
That's fine, Twilight said brightly. I can just cast a bubblehead charm on him. Spike's eyes widened. But do I run out of air? You shouldn't, Spike. The spell allows oxygen for the wire to permeate the bubble, siphoning out your exhaled carbon dioxide. Oh, okay, Spike smiled. Rainbow Dash nudged the mulberry drake, whispering in one of his ear spines. You actually understood any of that? When you've grown up with Twilight Sparkle as your mom, you pick up a lot of things. Wavebreaker cleared his throat, what sounded like a hoof on chalkboard. It was immensely effective, as the band rounded on him with wide eyes, flat ears, and gritted teeth.
If you will,
he said, as Angler lowered the Cyromelon's leaves in front of each of the 6 mares. The 7th returned to his saddle claim, giving one another tentative glances. Each mare balled up her leaf and shoved it wholly in their mouth. It had a rubbery, clammy texture to it, as though it had spent a great long time in the salty seawater. Which it most likely had. It was definitely not terribly palatable, most probably used by mermares as a last resort on long-distance journeys. As one, they swallowed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Behind her, Twilight could hear Rainbow Dash rustling impatiently. And just before the inevitable declaration of boredom, a hot, stabbing pain shot through either side of Twilight's neck, and she felt like knives were stabbing her in the back of her hooves. Cries of surprise and pain rung out behind her, and Twilight knew that same feeling was being felt by her friends. Though she never experienced this before, Twilight knew that the first time usage of Siren Melon leaves was as painful as it was surprising, especially for Pegasi. Their whole wings were transformed into large, translucent fins for the duration of the effects. Once the pain subdued, Twilight faced her friends. Each of them now had gills on their necks and fins on their fetlocks. Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy now had transparent fins where their wings normally were. Fluttershy was shaking inconsolably, and Pinkie... Wait.
Pinkie, why didn't you change?
Twilight asked in a screeching above Mermare voice. Twilight looked herself over, taking her fetlocks.
Really? Silly me. I forgot to.
She took in a deep breath, placed one of her foreheads to her mouth, and blew into it. In moments, deep pink fins erupted from the backs of her hooves, and gills split open her neck.
Tyler!
Twilight blinked.
Something is wrong with me if I don't question this. I can't breathe! What's going wrong with my voice?
Rarity cried out in a high, screeching voice. Apparently, she did not take to being temporarily amphibious.
I don't hear a difference!
Growled Rainbow Dash, her wing fins bristling. If her voice was grating before, its scratchiness was tenfold now.
Nada do I!
Applejack drawled, looking at the silent Pegasus. Rainbow scowled darkly at the animal former.
Well, if you would come with us,
asked the mermare beside Wavebreaker, before the sixes had turned back toward the wire.
Excuses for a moment,
Twilight said, before facing Spike with a glow of her horn. Spale matrices aligned in Twilight's Alicorn, and a pink bubble emerged from the tip, floating down to Spike. He reached for it curiously, before it slid down over his head without bursting. Once it completely encompassed the drake's head, Twilight's horn stopped glowing, and the bubble turned colorless and translucent. Twilight felt the bubble around his head, and before looking at Twilight. "Thanks, Wall!" His voice came distorted by the bubble, and he chuckled. "Now my voice sounds all funny." Pinkie Pie joined in the laughing.
Now, if you please, we're on a bit of a schedule,
Wavebreaker said sharply.
But our saddlebags,
Fluttershy said, before clapping her hooves over her mouth at how raspy she sounded. Agra spoke.
If you allow me, I shall carry them in my bubble magic until we can retrieve more appropriate baggage for you.
Acquiescing, the band relinquished their saddlebags, and soon they were floating in a half-dozen deep blue bubbles around their head.
Now then, let's go,
Wavebreaker said, with no small degree of impatience, before he and his 5 fellow mermares dived back into the water.
Well, here goes nothing,
Twilight breathed, before leaping into the water.
Wait for me, Mom,
Spike called, running out after Twilight down into the deep. Rarity whimpered,
I don't like to get my maid wet,
before closing her eyes and charging into the sea. Don't think I'm going to be too long before you, Rarely! Applejack called as he galloped into the water's edge and did a flying leap into the deeper parts of the water.
Whee! Cannonball!
Pinkie cheered as he almost literally flew over the water, before curling up into a perfect pink ball and slamming into the sea. Rainbow Dash turned to see Fluttershy, taking the timid Pegasus' hoof in her own, and offering a sincere, tender smile.
Wanna hold my hoof on the way in?
Fluttershy blushed.
Oh, you don't have to, Rainbow, my dear. It's no big deal. I want to, so I will anyway,
Rainbow replied.
You ready?
Fluttershy nodded, never breaking eye contact with her darling Rainbow Dash, her hoof close to Rainbow's.
Good!
Rainbow Dash smirked before she darted into the water, almost dragging Fluttershy behind her. The water was life. The first breath that Twilight took through her gills refreshed her far more than she could ever have imagined. A wide smile broke across her muzzle as she flipped through the water. These fins were almost like second nature to her. She felt so free. This must be what Pegasi feel all the time. "Wait up, Mom!" Spike cried out, just clapping his claws frantically to keep up with Twilight. Twilight giggled to herself as she used her magic to draw Spike toward her. "Wrap your arms around my neck, Spike," Twilight told him, and she was pleased to hear that her voice was back to normal. "And try not to cover my gills. I do need to breathe." Spike nodded and did as Twilight told. Just as Rarity came charging down from the surface. She inhaled deeply, her gills flaring as she took her first underwater breath. "Omega above, this is simply divine!" she gasped startlingly. "My voice is back, and my mane!" She flipped her mane back and forth. "My mane is still gloriously coiffed!" "Yeehaw!" called out Applejack as he came to a stop beside Rarity, smirking slyly. "Don't go thinking you're all more daring than I am!" Before Rarity could retort, a pink spear as big as a pony's head dotted between the country pony and Fasinisa. Once the cloud of bubbles cleared up around the pink ball, it let out a faint pop and expanded out into Pinkie Pie. She cheered with a "Wee-hee-hoo!" and flapped her fins as he spun around in circles. The Pegasi of the band slipped down into the group. Which is to say, Rainbow Dash slipped down into the group with a squealing Fluttershy in tone. The moment she joined in the circle, she unhooked her hoof from Fluttershy's and began to flap her back fins vigorously. Sand kicked up from the bottom of the ocean floor, but Rainbow Dash barely left the ground. "Why can't I fly?" "Or swim," she complained with a strained voice. Fluttershy took a tentative flap of her fins, receiving no lift. Then she flapped marginally harder, though still lower than she would have flapped her wings on the surface. Her hooves left the sandy bottom for a few moments. Smiling slightly, she began to flap her fins slowly and regularly. She floated hesitantly off the ocean floor, leveling off just over the heads of the rest of her band. Rainbow Dash gaped. "How are you doing that?" "She took things at a lower foot pace," said a hypnotically beautiful stallion's voice, and the seven turned in shock to see it was Wavebreaker who had spoken. Evidently, Mermare's and Stallions' voices became completely screechy as a result of being out of the water. "She chose not to rush herself in an unfamiliar situation, and learned at a speed she was comfortable with." "But I'm only comfortable with going real fast." "Sometimes," said the back-fin Mermare, "we learn best when we take things in slowly." "Now," Wavebreaker continued, "shall we return to the capital?" "Of course," Twilight replied. "But how did you get here so fast?" The back-fin Stallion grinned broadly. "The same way we'll go back so fast!" It waved a hoof off deeper into the ocean, and the band of landmares blinked at the undersea view stretching out into the darkness ahead of them. By the light of the moon above, however, they could see the shape of a large fish-like creature with pronounced pelvic fins resembling a bird's wings, and a substantial crest of a dorsal fin, and a sharp avian beak. "A mandahawk!" Twilight gasped. "The fastest swimmer Queen Leo's oceans have to offer," Wavebreaker said proudly, before facing the horned Mermare and Stallion. "Sea Light, Angler, get on ahead, and let them know that Queen Celestia's company is on her way." The horned Mermares nodded. "Say Mermare a couple of times, it's fun." With a flash of their horns, vanished in twin clouds of glowing bubbles. Twilight blinked at her first sight of an underwater wink-out. "Now, come along, Twilight and company," waved Wavebreaker. "Climb aboard the Mandahawk's back, and let us carry us to Leonese." Twilight flipped her fins as best as she could, though she understood the basic movements that she would need to make. A dozen and 10 years of learning to trot, to canter, to gallop kept coming back to her, and she found herself fumbling through the water awkwardly. Wavebreaker and His mermare counterpart took her forehose and each of theirs and guided her forwards, and Twilight found her forward momentum much more stable. If Twilight thought she was having a bad time getting her sea legs, Applejack fared worse. The farmer was a very grounded mare, barely ever catching sight of a body of water larger than a puddle. And now she had found herself thrust into the largest ocean of Harmonia, with little preamble or preparation. It took Fluttershy, with her uncanny learning curve, to hoist the unsteady earth pony up into the air and toward the Mantelhawk. "Thanks, Flutters," Applejack murmured.
Oh, you're welcome, Applejack.
Fluttershy replied haltingly. Rainbow Dash looked nervously on the fins on her back, where her wings used to be. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to flap them. With each full flap, she let the sea for a little more, confidence growing in her chest. She began to flap faster and faster, though not as frantically as before. Grinning broadly, she drew her legs in close and flapped her fins hard, darting forward to the Mantelhawk with a barrel roll. Rarity watched Pinkie Pie quite literally canter through the water with giddy little twitches of her deep pink flatlock fins, and looked down to her own. The purple fins swayed this way and that. Rarity cocked an eyebrow at them. Experimenting, she switched the foreleg slowly, along with the opposite hind leg. She let the ocean floor for a small bit. Giggling to herself at her progress, she switched to the opposite legs, getting a bit more distance, letting out a decidedly un-Rarity-like whinny of a laugh. She took to a slow, cantering swim for her transport. "Hey, where are they? Think you can rustle up a bit more speed?" Applejack called out from the Mantelhawk's back.
A lady never rustles herself, Applejack,
Rarity shouted in return. "Time is of the essence, Miss Rarity," said the hornless mermare beside Wavebreaker. "We must put aside pleasantries and pretense. King Leo requests your immediate presence." "Patience, Backstroke," Wavebreaker said. "We need speed, not haste." Rarity took Backstroke's words to heart, though, and her succeeding host tricks were fuller and harder, as she reached the back of the Mantelhawk in less than a dozen in 8 seconds. She settled down onto the scaly back, silently wondering about how they would stay on the creature's back if it moved as quickly as the mermares attested. When she suddenly felt an ascension of sorts as her host touched the Mantelhawk's back, she looked in awe around each of her friends. Twilight smiled back.
This Mantelhawk has been trained by narwhal ponies to magically hold riders to its back, she explained. Isn't this great?
"What's a narwhal pony?" Rainbow Dash asked.
It's what mermaids call their unicorns, Twilight answered. Their earth ponies are seahorses, and their pegasi are called sailfins.
Backstroke looked mightily intrigued. "You mean you land ponies call your seahorses earth ponies? Tell me more." "Perhaps we can discuss this more," said the male sailfin, "once we return to Leonese." "Right," Wavebreaker said, before he looked ahead to the Mantelhawk's head. "Seville?" Seville the Mantelhawk turned his head toward the 10 equines on his back, his golden eye as big as any one of their torsos, his beak broad enough to snap any of them in two. He looked at Wavebreaker with an inquisitive gleam in his eye. "Take us back home, Civ." With an imperceptible nod, Civ flapped his pelvic fins, beelining up for the surface.
Wait, where are we going? Verity asked. The Equestrian capital is at the bottom of the ocean, isn't it?
"It is," the male sailfin explained, "but to get there, the Mantelhawk needs to leap out of the water to get its forward momentum going."
You mean...
Fluttershy and Rarity asked in fear.
You
mean... Rainbow Dash and Pinkie asked in anticipation. "Yes." Wavebreaker shouted in a broad grin. "We're going to breach!" "Breach?" Applejack asked. "What's breach? Mine?" Her question was answered almost immediately. Sav soared up and out of the water, and for several glorious moments they were suspended in midair, the Mantelhawk's pelvic fins fully extended as he crested through the air. Ocean spray around him glistening under the starlight and moonlight. Then Sev pulled his fins in and dove into the ocean like an arrow. The four mares screaming in fear, and two whooping in delight
as the Mandahawk tore through the seawater faster than any other creature in the sea. Woot. Deeper and deeper into the ocean did Sev carry his 11 passengers, and eventually, even the light of the night sky above the ocean dimmed to nothing. In almost no time, though, their eyes adjusted to the dark, and the land dwellers spied veritable forests of reefs, coral, and seaweed, and fronds in every direction. Schools of fish of every color, shape, and size parted at the sight of Sev the Mandahawk. Mandahawks are the apex predator of these waters, explained Haiten, the male sailfin. Introductions passed by way of terrible sounding moments after Sev reached top speed. No fast is faster or deadlier. They are the perfect high-speed transport for any pony who could tame them. Who? Tying Sev here, Ivanka, I ask. Applejack asked. The Beastmasters of our Palanci. I've been taming merman mounts since our ancestors started living here in the ocean, explained Beachcomber, High Tide's twin sister. Not every pony can jet out, so we need high-speed mounts to take us far and wide across the ocean for food. I'll see. Speaking of seeing, interjected Backstroke, what says crested this oncoming ridge? We should be right about in Leonese. I thought it was starting to look a bit light again. Twilight thought. Her eyes narrowed slightly at the prismatic lights dancing past the ridge. What wonders waited upon them, arriving at Leonese, the capital of Equestria's aquatic neighbor, Equestria. Sev crested the ridge, broadening his fins as to slow himself down for the approach. Ooh! Wow! By the light of Celestia's sun. Well, I'll be. Oh my. Whoa. So cool! Towering pinnacles of coral and rock rose up from the seafloor, with fronds of seaweed woven together for bridges interlinking almost every building. Some sort of glowing algae lined the sides of the buildings, bathing the aquatic metropolis in a pale heavenly light. Darting to and fro amongst the sea scrapers were a myriad of mermairs, sallies, dolphins, manatees, narwhals. A low song echoed through the water around them, and Twilight and her band looked up to see the shape of a whale passing across their path. I think Captain Nemo would very well like to welcome you to Leonese, Wavebreaker said jovially, waving a hoof at the pale white whale. Captain Nemo? Twilight mused, with a faint knowing smile at the whale's scarred form. As they approached the aquatic capital, many mermairs of all sorts poked their heads out of the seaweed, flanking the path that Sev took. They cast curious, wondrous eyes at the 7 non-mermairs astride the Mandahawk with 4 of their own, particularly upon the prismatic conch clutched in the mulberry drake's claws. Spike waved a claw nervously at the crowd, and a merfilly beside her heavily pregnant father waved back. Well, on behalf of King Leo and all the mermairs and most stallions of Equestria, Wavebreaker said with a clear voice, I welcome you to Leonese, the greatest city under the sea. If the city was bewildering from a distance, to soar through the streets of Leonese itself, astride a Mandahawk of all creatures, was most stupefying. While Twilight still thought of Canterlot as the most beautiful city in all Harmonia, though she had yet to visit every other city in Harmonia to justify that feeling, she would have to say that Leonese was a close second. Rocks honed into the shapes of minarets, and towers by mermairs of Megarosa Pass shone as if coated with pearl, with coral accenting the buildings and acting as additional support or windows if need be. The algae patches of blue glow emitted a faint warmth, enhancing the welcoming feel of such a city beneath the waves. The bridges of seaweed and kelp that Sev passed as they swam toward the center of Leonese were far larger than Twilight had reckoned, and served more of versatile purpose than she imagined prior as well. As any inhabitant of Leonese swam by, she or he would take a small chunk of seaweed in their mouth, leaving a clam in its place. They were Snapper Girl's snack bars.
and those who called Leonese home were a fine sort as well. Far from the haughty elitists of Canterlot, everyone who Sev passed gave a warm welcome to the passing newcomers, and casually engaged in brief discourse with the four accompanying mermares. The fins on Rainbow's dad's fetlocks bristled impatiently. "This is boring! I need to fly!" The clear fins on her back rustled.
"Do as you wish, Rainbow's ass,"
Windbreaker said with a surprisingly light tone.
"But take care not to lose sight of Sev here. If you slow us down, we won't wait up for you. The king's message is imperative."
Yeah, Board King business. Got it! And Rainbow Dash was off Sev's back as quick as could be, her fins flapping none too fast nor too slow. It had an immediate effect, however, as a blissful smile crossed her muzzle and creased on her eyes. The expression was quickly replaced with one of sheer audacity as he began to perform loop-de-loops and corkscrews around Sev, who followed her with one eye, keeping the other on his twisting path. For the streets of the city of Leonese did not travel in straight lines, but rather turned with the erratic shapes of sea scrapers. Even the most direct path to one's destination often entailed a fair amount of circling around if one did not wish to take sharp turns, which, considering that mermares and stallions were more adapted swimming in straight lines and gradual curves than turning sharply, resulted in a rather more leisurely lifestyle in the Equestrian capital.
"We should be arriving at King Leo's palace shortly,"
Windbreaker said to Twilight, who was holding Spike between her forelegs. Twilight smiled and nodded in reply. "It's been too long since we last met."
Whoa! Hold on a second!"
Rainbow Dash said as she circled back over Sev's back.
"King Leo, city of Leonese? Isn't your kid a bit big-headed?"
"You're one to talk,"
Applejack snarled. Rainbow Dash flashed a fangy grin at her aptly friend.
"I'm not big-headed. I'm awesome!"
Big-headedness or awesomeness aside, Twilight cut in crossly, Leonese was not named by King Leo, but by his steward Seawinkle in the year 22 ER, when Equestria declared her independence from Equestria. Beachcomber gave Twilight an impressed smile.
"You know our history quite well, Miss Twilight."
Twilight blushed humbly. "Well, I really like reading and—" Stark gasped from her compatriots as Savs rounded the corner and caused Twilight to trail off. And when she followed their eyes wide with astonishment, she herself took in a startling breath. Shells as large as whales fitted together to form a mostly flat and wide palace, gleaming with a golden light. Towering augur shells marked the 5 corners of Leo's palace. 2 of them respectively peaked with a blue light and purple light. From the heart of the palace erupted a singular augur shell, as tall as a blue whale was long, standing watch over all of Leonese. And they were approaching it.
"This is Mors, the palace of King Leo the Fatherless, immortal ruler of Equestria,"
explained Wavebreaker, a tone filled with awe, indicating he too was struck by the immensity of the palace Mors.
"It's amazing,"
Twilight said, lacking anything better to say as Sev approached the front gates of Mors. The moment that the Mantahawk settled before the mermares at the gates, Verity looked down to the seafloor, almost kissing the sandy bottom. The mermares on Sev's back gave her odd looks.
"She doesn't take well to travel, I guess,"
Twilight explained as she stood up on Sev's back. "She handled side-waking just fine at first, but she kind of felt sick for a little while after it. I feel kind of bad now."
"Well, she handled it better than I did,"
Applejack admitted as she looked down off of Sev's back. When she fell slower than she would have on land, she flapped her reddish fetlock fins furiously, to flap downwards faster. Kicking up sand on her landing, Applejack scratched behind her ear with a hind leg.
"I can't really say that I'm that big on slow follow in the water."
Feeling a gooey sucking on her hooves, Applejack looked down and saw she was already knee-deep in the briny sand. With a faint green glow about her legs, she managed to shook herself out.
"You would want to spend more time floating than actually standing,"
High Tide suggested.
"It's what fins are for."
Applejack scrunched her lips together, but she acquiesced quickly, as the alternative was having to continually use her earth pony magic to pull herself loose from the sandy suction. Spike hugged his arms tightly around Twilight's barrel, as he flapped her fins to float down to hover a host length above the sand. Just as Pinky and Fluttershy joined the rest of their band on the seafloor.
So, we're all set and ready to meet the king?
Fluttershy asked meekly, pale pink fins on her fetlocks flicking. Just about, replied Wavebreaker, before swimming up to Sed's beak and running a hoof down it. The large Mantahawk closed its golden eyes and let out a content coo. Good boy. You've done good today. You'll feed especially well tonight. At this, Sed perked up noticeably, a smile, if it could be called that, breaking onto his beak. Rows of minute, serrated teeth visible. Before Twilight could imagine what it was that Sed would be feeding on, the Mantahawk flapped his pelvic fins and took to the air, so to speak, disappearing in the hazy atmosphere of the sea. Wavebreaker presents himself, said the self-same seahorse to the mermaid guards before the gates. He calls bearing the pupil of Queen Celestia and her venison from Equestria to meet with Queen Leo post-haste. The mermaids in the clamshell armor glanced at one another, before nodding at Wavebreaker and uncrossing the spears that they had crossed across the pearly gates of King Leo's palace. You may proceed, said one of the mermaid guards. Wavebreaker smiled. I thank you. Before swimming up to the gates, was swung open of their own just as he reached them. Sweet! Self-opening gates! Rainbow Dash grinned, darting after Wavebreaker. Twilight's sapphire fins twisted a little at the Pegasus's brassness, offering what she hoped was an apologetic smile to the guard's ponies, before swimming after her herself, her band and Wavebreaker following only after a moment. The path leading to the palace from the gates was made from a single smooth slab of stone, flanked on either side by all manner of undersea plants. The trees, and the likes of which Twilight had only read about before. Having never been to Equestria before, Twilight had not thought that seeing these things she only seen in illustrations and woodcuts before would be very significant. She was wrong. This was breathtaking. Twilight truly wished she had the vernacular and skill with prose of some sort of her favorite authors, like A.K. Yearling and Inky Dart, so she could describe this beauty to the others. Breaching the main archway and leading into Morse, Twilight found Wavebreaker, speaking with narwhal ponies Sealight and Angler. Rainbow Dash sitting miserably at his side. Twilight approached her warily. He says I can't go in ahead of you guys, he grumbled. It's not like I would have knocked anything over. I trust that you wouldn't, Wavebreaker said, as he broke off from the narwhal ponies. But since we were instructed that Twilight Sparkle and her band should be brought before the king, I assumed that you and your group would remain together as much as possible, until after parleying with King Leo. Rainbow Dash huffed, folding her forelegs morosely. Fine, but I really need to dash!
Well, the sooner you and your friends can see the king,
said Sealight as he drifted towards Twilight,
the sooner we can assuage your friends' impatience.
Allow us, Angler said, turning into the archway into Morse. Sealight followed after, then Wavebreaker and his band, then Twilight and hers. The long walls and high arched ceilings seemed to polish with some sort of pearly lacquer, reflecting the light of the luminescent jellyfish, which drifted freely about the hall. Archways branched off into other halls, beneath large painted directions of war and peace between the mermaids and various foes. Cool, the Sanguine, Skulm, Lakoth, Aboleth, and even an epidemic Alessiodon. Whoa! Rainbow Dash's eyes widened at one painting. Is that a giant squid?
Not quite,
answered Beastcomber.
but that is an aberration amongst the likes of a giant squid.
The Kraken!
Yes, its maws and tentacles resemble that of a giant squid of which you speak, but notice the crustacean claws behind its soulless white eyes, and the shell as hard as iron ending upon its armored white whale tail.
She stuttered. It still haunts the dreams of mermaids, even so many days later. Flame of Dash returned her eyes to the Kraken, like to battle over Leonese with some sort of great fish. What happened? She asked, enraptured. The beast struck us, almost a dozen years ago. It had stood after Megarosa dreamless sleep, and she sought to bring the end upon us. It would have been the end of Leonese, and Maker knows how much else, but for the friendship of King Leo struck with the mightiest of all whales, Captain Nemo. The 6 pairs of eyes swiveled toward the great fish they saw fighting the Kraken. It was indeed the same pale white whale with an exceptionally long serpentine tail they had seen crossing the threshold into Leonese. No way, Spike said with a broad grin behind his bubbly sorts of air. Is that how she got all those scars? Every one of them, replied Angler. You may ask her one day, when you have the time. So, that's why you were so caught up in Captain Nemo when we came in. Rainbow Dash darted down to Twilight, beaming at the lavender unicorn. You totally knew that story of how she totally killed that Kraken! Twilight chuckled nervously. Well, yeah, I have read about it. I wasn't exactly privy to the idea that King Leo and Captain Nemo were friends, but I guess it makes sense. Also, the Kraken isn't dead. 6 pairs of eyes widened in horror at Twilight. What? Spike gasped, pointing up at the eldritch sea beast locked in frozen battle with Captain Nemo on the sea-painted portrait. So, that thing is still out there?
I'm afraid so,
Sallies said with a flourish of her bony alicorn to indicate that they speak as they continued to swim down the main hall.
After it became clear that Captain Nemo would battle the beast to their mutual deaths, so the scouts say, it fled to the deepest and darkest caves in the ocean. There it may rest until the Unmaker's coming.
The remaining time spent traveling towards King Leo's throne room was spent in morbid silence. It seemed that Nightmare Moon and the fell abominations of Tartarus were not the only unworldly menaces to Harmonia. Queen Celestia had to have known about them, and perhaps even played some role in keeping them from harming the peace-loving denizens of the world. Twilight knew that Queen Celestia and King Leo were very close, apparently having kept in touch with each other for gross centuries, and maybe even Megarosa. It would not be a terrible surprise to Twilight if Queen Celestia knew of the Kraken and took measures to further inhibit it. She may even encourage Queen Leo to befriend Captain Nemo to begin with. Wait! She thought as she passed by tapestries woven out of dried seaweed, forming heraldry of ancient armor. King Leo forms a bond of friendship with Captain Nemo, who comes to Leonese and Equestria's aid and drives out the Kraken. Queen Celestia bids me to make friends to defeat Nightmare Moon. I already know friendship can drive a pony to do incredible things, but what can 6 mares and a drake possibly do against the Alicorn Knight herself? We're here, Wavebreaker said abruptly, stopping before a large double doors, forged out of interlinked shells of many colors. A pair of clamshells were doorknobs. Wavebreaker approached with reverent air, slowly knocking on the door. The double doors glowed, and a brilliant sea-green glimmer shimmer, and a deep voice growled, Enter! And the door slowly opened outwards, and Twilight and her band gaped in wonder. The throne room of Queen Leo of Equestria, King Leo, was a wide, circular space, walls arcing into a singular golden dome overhead with a circle, opening up into the ocean in the middle. There was no apparent light source. It was as though there was some invisible light in the air that lit up the sanctum. The floor was a prismatic helix that dazzled the eyes, as if some titanic snail shell had been pressed flat into a perfectly smooth surface. Archways at regular intervals along the walls formed alcoves which displayed ancient heroes of Equestria, graven in cold stone. At the far end, directly opposite the double doors, was a construct of numerous rainbow shells and conches, within which sat a sea-green and vermilion shape which glinted gold off of them. Shaking off her astonishment at the scope of the Equestrian king's throne room, Twilight and her band followed Wavebreaker and his 5 more rare friends toward King Leo himself. If they only had time to admire each of the cavern forms representing some hero of the realm. Surely, there was a veritable treasure trove of information that we could glean from these, but Twilight had not caught her readings on these mermares, or that she had forgotten. After what seemed like hours, they stood before King Leo, ruler of the mermares. Despite being the king of the mermares of Equestria, no mer stallion was he, but a large and majestic sea lion of sorts. His front half was like that of a lion, with a wild vermilion mane, but with sea-green scales and vermilion fins along his paws. Twin golden horns immense from them in front of his thin ears. More akin to a shark was his back half, with pelvic fins that were his hind legs should be, and a spiny dorsal fin. Along the back of his head, trailing down his back, was a golden set of spines, which resembled a crown at its crest, and he wore a cape of blue-dyed seaweed.
"Welcome, I say,"
he said in the same low growl that he had just before they entered his throne room. He rose up from his seat, holding a large thin paw out, which Twilight swept up into and nuzzled. "It's been far too long, Your Majesty," she said in reverence, "and I wish my first visit to Equestria could be in better times."
"Indeed,"
replied King Leo, a dark look in his eyes.
"but let us enter a more casual place. I believe that you and your band are quite hungry and tired. You have traveled a long and bitter way. I bid you, stay as long as you please in Equestria. You are in safe hands with us."
His eyes fell upon Spike, holding out the prism conch. The Equestrian king's eyes sparkled.
"You found the prism conch. I knew that when I heard it again, that it had been found at long last."
King Leo's private dining hall was far smaller and more intimate than his throne room, though by no means less extravagant. At the center of the hall was a long table made out of a slab of white marble, balanced on a few stacks of clamshells. Fronds of coral spread out across the window openings, and algae along the convex ceiling provided light that the outside could not.
"Be seated here, Miss Sparkle,"
said King Leo, gesturing a paw at the spot to his immediate right. Twilight hesitated, but only for a moment. There was a pending discussion of great significance. The land was not the only place in the world that would be affected by the stagnant sun and moon. "Spike, Applejack, Verity, I would like you three at my side," Twilight said brightly. "Verity!" Spike called from his seat at Twilight's right. "Come sit next to me!" Verity giggled lightly. "Well, if you insist, you brave little drink." Applejack scrunched up at his muzzle, before shrugging. She wanted to be as close to Twilight's side as she could, and, if not for Spike's precocious crush on Rarity. She smiled in resignation, seating herself on her haunches to Rarity's right. She couldn't stay mad at a little kid over an infatuation. "So, what sort of food does Equestria have to offer?" Twilight asked the king politely.
"Well,"
King Leo said lightly,
"we can offer you any dish that you so please here in my palace. Being the king does have that benefit."
"I sure as sugar could go for an old-fashioned apple pie right now," Applejack said joyously. "I would be fine with a daisy and oat salad, if you please," Verity said in a formal tone.
I'll just have whatever you offer me. I don't want to impose,"
Fireside said meekly. "I'll take a watermelon! A whole watermelon!" called out Rainbow Dash. "You guys wouldn't happen to have any rubies, would ya?" Spike irritated.
"I'll take some kelp and eelgrass a la mode."
Twilight and King Leo blinked.
"Well, I'm certain that our stores can indeed prepare food to your likings,"
The sea lion said levelly.
"I am perplexed that your pink companions should know an exact item on the Equestrian menu. Are you sure that this is your first time under the sea?"
Pinky nodded.
Then, how did you know?"
"Begging your pardon, King Leo," Twilight interjected, "but that's just Pinkie Pie being Pinkie Pie. I try not to question it too much." King Leo nodded slowly, glancing back to Pinkie with wary golden eyes.
"In any case, the sorrow melon at least affect the appetite of ponies who eat it for the duration of their transformation. You may anticipate cravings of aquatic flair, and so we will have to substitute what we have learned to do not agree with your stomachs in your quasi-mermaid state.
That's fine. Just don't give me any camp or seaweed, Applejack said, in as polite a voice as he could muster. I don't particularly like them.
I don't mean to disagree with you now, Lady Applejack, King Leo replied, but your stomach might later.
Excuse me, King Leo? Twilight asked. But aren't we to discuss what we should do about Nightmare Moon? King Leo placed a large but gentle paw on Twilight's shoulder.
My child, your goal is noble, but this quest that Celestia set you on is not one that shall be accomplished in haste. You and your companions tired, and yearn for rest.
Twilight almost protested, but her stomach took that moment to betray her, and growled loudly, reverberating loudly through the water. King Leo gave an amused smile, and Twilight returned it in nervousness. I'll have a kelp forest cake. Applejack propped her bowl up on her forehouse. I'd like some more, if you please! The mermaid witnessed arts and eyebrows as he floated by, taking the bowl in her mouth. I never took you to be such a connoisseur for kelp, Applejack, Rarity commented. Can't help it. It's just so good! Applejack replied indignantly. King Leo smiled amusedly, a paw resting on the crescent conch.
Did I not say that you would find your brain and your stomach at odds with one another?
He turned to face Twilight.
Is the kelp forest to your liking, Twilight Sparkle?
Twilight nodded vigorously, a fork levitating in her glimmer shimmer. It is, Your Highness! Exactly as I remember it, but better!
That would be the mermaid in you speaking, child, the king beamed. You and your friends are welcome down here at any time.
Twilight looked out across the dining table, at her friends. Twilight supposed that all 5 of these mares were her friends to her now, and at Wavebreaker and his band, as the whole lot of them dined upon the Equestria's finest dishes. As Twilight understood it, certain food from the service did not taste well to mermares, such as apples. In that way, many of their meals had to go altered to account for the alterations to their biology, due to the siren melon leaves in their systems. Lucky, the quasi-mermare Applejack had a much greater affinity for kelp and seaweed than landlubber Applejack. The fact that Leo and the mermaids ordered meals that contained meat to them was a matter of revulsion and horror to the more sensitive of the foreigners, primarily Rarity and Fluttershy. Twilight, who had experience with Spike's carnivorous tendencies, alleviated concerns, pointing out that mermaids never ate anything that thought at the sapient level of a pony. Things like tuna, clams, crabs, lobsters, and polyps were fair game, while creatures like dolphins, octopi, narwhal, and aboleth were off limits. Trusting Twilight at her word, any further ill feelings were silenced, though Twilight did spot Rainbow Dash's eyes darting over at the crab legs on Beachcomber's plate. Twilight looked down at the prison conch under King Leo's paw, as he cleared her throat a little at the king. Excuse me, King Leo, but how did you anticipate that ponies would find the prison conch? King Leo looked to face Twilight from the slab of tiger fish on his plate.
Oh, well, I shall discuss this in further detail with you later. It's not proper discourse in present company, I trust.
He began again in a louder voice, indicating Twilight need not to repeat her line of questioning at the table.
That ruse have been raised for Twilight Sparkle and her friends!
Yes, sir, replied Angler from his spot at the table.
Excellent, my boy! Nothing but the best for my cousin Star Pupil and her friends!
Rainbow Dash almost choked on a watermelon seed, and Pinkie Pie lamented not having access to a glass of water to spit take with.
Hold your horses there, King Leo,
Applejack said. Your cousins with Queen Celestia? King Leo looked out from one of his tall coral windows.
You could say that. Our family history is complicated. Not good table conversation, not at all. And I'd rather not put you girls off your appetites.
Hey! Spike asked. What about my appetite?
He waved a large, half-eaten ruby indignantly at King Leo. The sea lion let out a hearty laugh and clapped a large paw on Spike's back.
Don't worry one bit, son. Your appetite will always be whet at my table.
Why? 'Cause of the water? As Rainbow asked, a too wide grin on her face. King Leo grinned back, revealing fangs and teeth as sharp as knives. Rainbow Dash's dry grin sagged slightly. Twilight coughed lightly. Ahem. Back to the subject of King Leo. We were told to meet with you at utmost speed.
And you were.
King Leo replied.
And I have a very firm idea of what has transpired. But perhaps you and your friends can explain in finer detail of what has befallen my queenly cousin and her queen Equestria nation.
And so, for the next half hour, Twilight Sparkle and her friends explained the highs and lows of the journey they had taken. From Twilight's first discovery of the prophecy regarding Nightmare Moon to their arrival at the edge of Equestria's shores. It was mostly Twilight's job to explain the trek to King Leo, with help from her friends when their experiences filled in gaps that Twilight was not privy to. It was imperative that King Leo be brought as up to date as possible on their journey. By the time they had finished, the temperature of the water seemed to have dropped about 10 degrees as well. King Leo ran a paw through his vermilion mane, golden claws protecting from the end of each digit. Slowly, he placed his paws on the table, flapping his tail fin so he could float over the table itself.
I cannot go forth with an army to face the Night Queen,
he growled lowly, looking at his golden claws.
My little mermaids are such fragile creatures out of their homely waters, and Canterlot is so far inland. Besides, I must protect my own here. The oceans are growing colder, and my control over the tides can only keep up with the boiling oceans and the other half of Harmonia for so long. Balance must be maintained, but not on the back of one. No one can keep balance in the world alone. Not I, not my cousin Celestia, not even you, Twilight Sparkle. But if Celestia believes that you and her friends have the power to bring her back from her own madness.
Yes, Twilight blinked hopefully, wondering. That's the third time some ponies made it sound like Nightmare Moon's some kind of puppet. First the Queen, then Crescent Rose, and now Uncle Leo. Before King Leo faced away from Twilight Sparkle, giving her a full view of his cape and dried kelp.
There is a narbacular tunnel that you can access in Atlas Transit Services. I shall pay your fares. Pass through it the precise number of times you are instructed to, and you should arrive at the coastlines of eastern Ponyville. Not even a day's journey to Nuyase na Nuepe.
A great beam of light shone through Twilight's heart, as he found herself flapping her sapphire fetlong fins eagerly, actually floating off the stony floor by about a hoof. Oh, thank you, King Leo! This is a real help! You bet! Pinky interjected gleefully, flipping to and fro across the table, drawing many arched eyebrows and sharp glares. It's super tough not having to try around for days and days and days and days and having to slow yourself down because all your best pony friends had to slow down and take rest all the time because no pony is totally humped up on sugar all the time like I am just because I love it. King Leo, who had seen all sorts of terrors of the ocean that would baffle a land-dweller, but paralyze an equestrian, could only blink.
She is always like this, you say?
Very so, your majesty, Applejack replied. You can't get used to it after a while. Letting out a growling cough, King Leo regained his composure.
Regardless, you would need to give the Siren Melon effects time to subside. Until that time has come upon us, you seven shall call Morris and Leonice your home.
If you say so, your eminence. I don't mean in any way to sound impatient, your highness, Rarity queried, but why must we wait until we begin to become non-ponies again? King Leo rested one paw atop the other.
You have to understand. Siren Melon's effects cause a land pony's body to pretend more heavily on breathing underwater than a mermare. In short, you would not last as long out of water as a mermare would in your current state. As such, I would advise that you make preparations to leave within an hour of the 7th day, since you have all adjusted to Siren Melon leaves.
Also, added Sea Light, levitating 6 pairs of clamshite in her bright green simmer. We have outfitted your old saddlebags with new clamshell exteriors to protect the contents from any damage. Each one should respond to your prints. The seashell saddlebags floated down from one end of the dining table, stopping before each of the 6 mares. A certain saddlebag passed by the certain mares. They each lit up in the eye color of the mare, before quickly being set down by her side. Dinner wrapped up relatively smoothly, and after a long day that began with raiding the Crystal Mountain's secure storage facility for studies on Ponyville culture, all that any pony, and Spike, wanted to see nothing else but a soft bale of hay to rest in. Bales of hay being rather lacking at the bottom of the ocean, and King Leo loathed to risk the potential saviors of Equestria, and Harmonia dying by resting their quasi-mare bunnies in one of the dry rooms. Twilight Sparkle and her party were allotted 6 rooms in the king's private guest ring. The moment that Spike saw the clamshell opening up in their room, a pearly pink shine to the walls, he let himself fall right into it, and he was asleep in moments. Twilight smiled down at him. Clamshells for beds. I suppose they've been trained not to try eating any pony who rests in them. Twilight leaned down to Spike, and, feeling daring, kissed him on his scaly forehead. Sweet dreams, my number 1 little assistant.
Seems you have become quite fond of the lad, Twilight.
Came a low growl from the entrance to Twilight's room. A mere curtain of seaweed, privacy was taken for granted, in a good way, down in Equestria. And when Twilight turned to face the owner of the voice, surely enough, the mighty king of the ocean swept in. Oh, Uncle Leo, it's nothing like that, she said evasively. It's just, it was a long day. We're all tired and...
True feelings come out in moments of weakness. Remember that, my dear.
Twilight had no answer to that.
Any further progress on your parents?
She avoided his eyes with a sigh. No, I'm on the right track, I feel, but I just need more power.
Leo nodded slowly.
And no pony else can reverse the transformation?
Twilight shook her head, invisible tears instantly joining the salty water around her. King Celestia said that transformation spells can only be reversed by the unicorn who cast it. It was a failsafe, devised by Star Swirl reputed, but no pony's ever transformed a whole pony before. It can only be me, and my...
King Leo slammed forward, pulling Twilight in towards his chest with a large paw. There, she cried for a long while.
Give it time, Twilight Sparkle. Time mends all things. Even bad blood will out in the end. Why, my father and brothers would always stir up such a fuss. But that's a story you wouldn't like to hear, I'm sure.
Twilight chuckled tearfully, and King Leo returned to laugh deeply.
You are much quicker to laughter now. So, my dear, has that Pinkie Pie been sharing her secret with you?
Twilight took back more laughter, before replying shakily,
You could say that. She drives me up the wall, so... Ponies just should not be able to do what she does!
Legally?
Twilight looked up at her honorary uncle darkly.
If physics were a law book, Pinkie Pie would be a serial killer.
Really? Would you tell me more?
Twilight could not help but smirking.
That's a story you wouldn't want to hear, I'm sure.
King Leo bowed his head.
Touché.
Withdrawing slightly as her composure came back to her, Twilight faced Leo with a more serious countenance.
Now, Uncle, tell me, how you anticipated where and when some pony would find the prism cons?
King Leo waved a claw teasingly.
Paranoia's a stopped clock, my dear landlocked niece. It's only right 2 times a day.
Paranoia got me and my friends out of the Crystal Mountains alive. I still got 1 shot left this night.
The great sea lion blinked lightly, before nodding in acknowledgement.
Right. You always were one of Celestia's brightest. One of her most promising. Anyway, you must understand that this is something you are only discuss after you and your band have entered Ponyville.
Anything, Leo. Now, what is it?
I found the prism crons grown centuries ago.
I knew it! You... What?
I did!
Leo said, his chest rumbling with a belly laugh as he coaxed Twilight's slack jaw with his index toe.
You must understand that this is a long-standing arrangement. Celestia knew that Nightmare Moon would emerge on the dozen gross of summer solstice since her banishment, as Forget-Me-Not's prophecy foretold, and she could not be unprepared. I myself found the prism crons less than a year after its lost, but at Queen Celestia's behest, I would keep his recovery a secret from my subject, and she from hers. I don't know exactly why. Don't ask me why. But I suspect Celestia anticipated some word of it reaching Nightmare Moon somehow, and she would obviously do all she could to keep the element's bearers from unlocking the secrets of harmony. Celestia is a clever one, let me tell you that. Either that, or she likes to leave things to chance and coincidence, whichever floats your boat. She would have to anticipate that a pupil of hers would initiate the placement of her code in the Crystal Mountains. Then, she would have to have thought that said pupil would weak out to the Pastoric shoreline, as it is the nearest point to Ponyville in all of Equestria. I knew that such a student would need my help to get into Ponyville, so I held the conscious secret and waited. When the sun did not rise and alight upon my seas, I knew that time had come. I alerted my watchmares to renew their figure at the beacon, and I kept watch along the beach line. Then, barely a month later, I saw your little Drake trotting along the edge of my ocean, with that ravishingly beautiful unicorn mare of your party. I recalled him, and you, whom I also saw, from a diplomatic meeting several years ago. Surely you remember.
I do indeed, King Leo, Twilight said at the memory. Queen Celestia wanted me to become more worldly and more aware of the world outside books. Needless to say, she failed up until about a month ago.
So rare to hear you speak of Celestia failing in some manner, but I digress. Upon sighting your party at the edge of the Pastoric Ocean, I placed the prism crons at the edge of their view, knowing that it would catch his eyes, or hers, and, well, here we are.
Twilight nodded slowly. Suppose it made sense, but it seemed as though secrets and lies were tricks of Celestia's trade. Keeping the concept secret, lying about its loss.
Do not think ill of my dear Tia,
Leo interjected, as though he could read Twilight's mind.
I am an old ruler, canny enough to know that a pony's thoughts by reading their face. Straightforward solutions can be circumvented by cunning trickery. So, you have to be all the more cunning to trick the trickster. And is Nightmare Moon not the greatest trickster of all? Queen of the Veiled Night, which masks the terrors of the world, and makes them seem fair, or makes the fair seem terrible.
I suppose you're right, Uncle Leo. I can't afford to question the Queen's plans right now. For almost a dozen gross years now, she's maintained the Nicotherathon, which kept our world in order. If the harmony of this world remains upset for much longer, we could see the return of discord and chaos of Harmonia.
King Leo nodded darkly. The lights of his golden eyes dimmed slightly, at some black memory of which Twilight did not know.
Yes, discord.
Twilight smiled nervously, attempting to steer the conversation in a much more conductive direction.
Uncle Leo, may I ask you about the Queen of Ponyville?
Leo seemed to greatly appreciate the change in topic, as he pulled himself upright with his forelegs, standing completely straight upon the smooth, pearlescent floor.
Queen Malkika of Ponyville is very old. Very old. Perhaps the oldest creature on this planet who's not immortal like myself. Celestia, or well, Nightmare Moon. She is strict, tolerating no nonsense. But I see no reason why she would withhold the secrets of the elements from you. The only other recourse would be for Ponyville to burn away under the everlasting sun.
How does she know so much about the elements? She didn't help make them, did she?
King Leo shook his head.
She did not, and she has only seen the elements in action once. The day when the sun and moon shone in the sky together, when the moon attempted to block out the sun. Such a dreadful day, a fell day. It was the day the elements fell silent. Why, I do not entirely know. I can guess, but do not know. The elements are a mystery to even those who have beheld their power, as I have, 2.5 Mecharosa ago.
You have seen the elements? Twilight asked, glancing at the shadow cell beside Spike's cell bed. How do they work? What will they do?
I would not know, for I took no part in their making. There is only one you could ask presently who would know anything about their creation, as he currently sits upon a stolen throne.
Twilight's ears flattened.
I think that is all for tonight, my dear Twilight. I would not like to overfill your head with riddles that you will not puzzle you for a while now.
Planting a very whiskery kiss upon Twilight's forehead, King Leo swept down Twilight's bedchamber, leaving the lavender unicorn with the sleeping drake and her buzzing thoughts.